All right. Well, welcome again, everyone, to this online meetup. And the topic today is build your first no-code workflow automation in 25 minutes. So we'll make sure we'll stay within 25 minutes, maybe 30, but really no more than 30. My name is Max Katz, and I lead community for Okta Workflows. I'm joining today from warm San Francisco Bay Area. It's pretty warm here. I think it's close to 100. If you would like, I think it's always fun. Let everyone know where you're joining from. In chat, can be city, country, or whatever any other information you would like to share. I think it's always fun. I see San Diego. Welcome. I love San Diego. Very cool. But yeah, so just feel free to and it's in Minnesota, northern Minnesota. Welcome. Very cool. In Portland. All right. Welcome from Portland. And I see Chicago. Very nice. Cool. All right. So the plan is, the hello and welcome. That's what we're doing now. Then we're going to spend, pretty much all the time, building a workflow. Now, as I build a workflow, this is kind of an introduction to workflows. As I build a workflow, I'll cover some of the most important, parts of, building a workflow. I figured it's a good way to do that. As you build something, you kind of explain the various elements and parts of a workflow. And then, we'll have some time for questions and resources. And that's pretty much it. So yeah, let's spend the next 25 minutes building this this workflow. Let me just make sure there are no questions here. All right. Now, I also want to say what we're going to build. So we're going to build a flow that finds inactive users in your organization. Now, when I say by inactive, people who didn't log into your organization for X number of days. So, for example, 30 days. You want to see, you might have active users, but they haven't logged in for 30 days. And so you want to find out who those people are. Now, this is useful. One example is if they have access to some applications or licenses to some applications, and you see that they're not maybe using them. So maybe you want to, revoke those licenses from them, right? So that's one example where knowing when was their last login is helpful. So that's one example, but just in general, I think it's good to know who is signing into your organization and who is not signing in, for example. All right, so let's go to workflows, and let me start right here. All right, now, so when you start, this is the home page, and the home page has a number of resources, has videos, it has templates right here, and then some other resources on the right-hand side to help you get started. So this is the home page. Now flows, this is where all the flows are. Now on the left-hand side, I've got folders, and you can see I have a lot of different folders, and I tend to use emojis in the folder name. So that's something you can do as well. And then every folder has one or more flows. And so this one is identify inactive Okta users, and you can see I have two flows here, and again I'm using emojis. So these two, this is the example I'm going to build, and I just use this emoji to tell me that these are the working examples. So if something breaks, I can always go back to these examples. The flows, and then there are also tables, right? We're going to use tables as well, and so flows are all the flows, and then the tables. It's a good temporary storage for some data that your flows might use. or need to save, for example. So it's like a temporary, fast cache, I guess you can say. It's not a database, so you shouldn't be storing their data like a database, but something temporary, something small is a really good way to store data in tables. So this is the flows tab. Now connections, these are connections to various third-party services, all right? So you can connect, I think there are over 40, maybe 50 different connectors available. And you can see that this is a list of connections that I have. And so again, these are connections to external services that as you build the flow, you can sort of call or tap into. So that's for connections. And finally, there are templates, and these are ready to use out-of-the-box flows that solve a particular sort of problem or provide a solution that you can import into your dashboard and start using. So this is a really good way to learn. You can break stuff and you can then fix it, and you can remove it and then add the template again. So again, a great way to see some really good examples and also to help you learn. So that's kind of an overview of this dashboard and everything that you get here. So let's go back to flows. And again, I'm in this folder, identify inactive, and I'm going to go here. So again, we're going to build a flow that finds inactive users in your organization. And then we can specify, do you want to go maybe 30 days back? Do you want to go more than 30 days? That would be up to you. Now, to create a new flow, then there is this blue button, and I'm going to click new flow. And then it's usually, you want to give it a name. Once you save, it will prompt you for a name, but you can always do it right away. And so we're going to say first one is get. Just call this get users, and then search for users. You can add a description if you would like. Now, right here, again, you can enable this later, but you want to check this checkbox because this will allow us to see how the data passes when we run the flow. We can see how the data passes from card to card or step to step. Okay. So you can see right here, you can click on this back, and then again, you can change your name and description. All right. Now, so we got a flow. All right, it's blank. Now, how do you invoke a flow? So there are a number of ways you can invoke a flow. Actually, I think five, or maybe even 6. But let's see, 2 ways to invoke a flow. All right. Now, and you can see it says here, like when this happens, like something needs to happen, and then this flow will be invoked. So let's click here, add event. All right, and then just to quickly tell you what the various options are, and we're going to use 2 of them today. So first one, there is a schedule, right? So you can schedule this flow to run, maybe every hour, every day, every week. It will just automatically run. That's number 1. Number 2 is if an event happens. So if I go to Okta, for example, and I can see all the various events that I have support for. So let's say here, user account locked. So if you use this event, and I can actually go ahead and just click on it. And I'm going to delete it in a second. But what this means is that when a user's account is locked, this flow will be invoked. All right. So if some event happens in the system, you can invoke a flow this way as well. Now I'm using Okta, but of course you can use other applications as well. So it doesn't need to be just Okta. All right. As long as you create a connection to any of these services, and you can see which events those connections support, and again you can use them. All right. So this is the second way. Now, a third way is API endpoint. So what this does is that your flow will get a URL, and then from another application, you can call this URL and basically make a HTTP call. And then in turn, your flow will be invoked as well. And we can, I guess, just quickly try this. For example, and you can see there is this URL. Then you can use in another application and then invoke this flow. All right. So this is the third way you can invoke a flow. Let's delete this. Now, the fourth way is a helper flow, and then we're going to see this in a second. So you can have one flow call another flow. All right. So this is what the helper flow is. So I think we have 4 ways. Yes, 4 ways. Now, a fifth way is we're going to use this test button. Now, it does say test, but it's actually another way to invoke a flow. So if the flow runs really infrequently, or you want to manually call it, you can actually click test, and you can invoke a flow as well. So I think it's number 5. Now, there's a 6th, which I'm not going to show you today, but and it's coming up. This feature is, I think it's available as a beta right now, is a delegated flow, right? So you can delegate the flow execution to another user in your organization. So I think right now you have to be a super admin to call a flow. And of course, that gives kind of all the permissions to any user. But in some situations, you perhaps don't want to give that much sort of power to someone. And so you can delegate a flow. So you can delegate it to someone with less permissions, and then they can also call that flow as well. So that's called a delegated. I don't have it enabled here, but I think this is the 5th way. All right. All right. So that's how you call a flow. All right. Let's get this. Now, this one is going to be schedule. All right. And then you can see, let's say, we can say, we're not going to be testing it here, but let's say week. Every week on every Wednesday at 9 a.m. Pacific time, we're going to call this flow. Okay. Now, next is we're going to add an app action. Now, app action is any action where we invoke one of these services, one of these connections to an external service. Okay, so you can see all the actions here, app actions. The one we want is Okta, and then we can search. And then the one we want is list users with search. Now, we're going to be actually using streaming in a second, but now what happens is, let me show you here. Let's save. Now, if you want to test this, you need to select the helper flow, right? Now, we're going to create it in a second, but sometimes it's not convenient because you might want to just test this and see how this works, or test this flow, maybe without specifying the helper flow. You just want to see how this card works. And now you can do that. So what I recommend is, instead of using streaming, you can actually go to first 200 matching records. And then what it does is that we're going to find all the active users in our organization. Because what now you can do, you can actually test this card. And this is a very handy feature because most cards, you can test them individually. And I actually highly encourage you to do that, is to test each card individually. You can see there's a little play button, and then I can click test. Now, I have 4 users in my organization who are active. All right, and so you can see this works. Now, of course, if you have more than 200, then you want to see them here, but it still helps you kind of just make sure that this this search, this card works. Okay, so so this is it for this flow, right? So we're gonna find all the active users, and then what we're gonna do, we're gonna pass them, each user, to the helper flow. Now, in the helper flow, right, we are going to check the date. When was the last time they signed in? Okay, so let's do that. So let's save this, and we're going to come back to this flow in a few minutes. Let's go back here and then create a new flow and give this a name. Check last login. And maybe we can use this for the description as well. Now, this one, as I shared a few minutes ago, this is going to be a helper flow. Okay. Now, from the first flow, we're going to pass data into this flow. And so the way this works is that first there is this record. Now, record is going to be, it's kind of a pre-built object, but it's the current, it's the current user, right? So think of it as a loop in a way. And then the record will contain the current user. And the key is that this record has to be of type object, okay? Because the user actually, it's a JSON object with a lot of properties. Now, you don't have to list all of them, but you want to list the properties that you want to have access in this flow. So what we need is ID, and then we're going to create login, which is usually the email, and this is just like a numeric ID. And then finally, we're going to say last login. Every user, we're gonna see, when was their last login, right? That's the information we need to determine if they're active or not. Now, also one important thing is that whatever you're working with variables, there is a little sort of, if you put the mouse over, you can set its type. So type is important because you want to make sure you use the correct type. And so this is going to be a date, and these are okay as text. One more object we need to create is state. Now, what this does is, it's also an object. It allows us to pass any additional information to the helper flow. So this will get us the current user, and then this one, we're going to say time window. So what this is how far, is going to be a number. This is how far back do we want to check. So it can be 30 days, it can be 60 days, that's up to you. But we're going to pass this information to a flow. Okay. Now, and then we can save. Okay, now next is we are going, before we continue, let's just first make sure that this last login is not empty. It's possible some users never logged in. Now, if they never logged in, then we can just stop. We don't need to worry about them because they never logged in. Now, if you remember, app action, that's using a connection to one of these external services. You can see there is a list, and including Okta. Now, a function allows you, you can see there's a lot of different sort of functions here, but these are functions that allow you to work with data. So you can create lists, you can create objects, you can work with text, you can work with numbers. You can create if-else statements. You can create kind of a for each. You can work with files. So in a way, it just allows you to really manipulate and create data. Okay. And so the one we want is, so continue if. So this is a check. We say, hey, if last login is empty, then let's not continue this. So we're going to take last login, and we're going to map the data here. And the way you do it is, this is really, I love this. You just take it and then connect it like this. And then we're going to say, hey, if it's not empty, then continue. Now, if it is empty, we're going to say last login is empty, and we're going to stop the flow. So basically, continue if last login is not empty. Okay. Now, we can actually test this right away, just to see how this works. And when I click test, it's going to ask me for a record and then the state. This is the input. Now, what I have is right here, I've prepared a sample JSON, and then I can click test. And then right here. Okay. Now notice it says save inputs. It's checked. So if you want to test this again, you won't need to type it. Let's run the test. And you can see, so this is the data. There was the record and the state. And then last login is not empty. And so the message is null. which meaning I'm going to continue. Now, if last login was empty, then this message will be printed here, okay? But so far, last login is not empty. And again, let me just show you what I mean by that. You can see last login is not empty, and I have it right here. All right, let's continue. So next, we're going to get today's time, right? Because we're going to say, hey, today is June 22nd. Let's go back 30 days and check if there was a login within those 30 days. So again, I'm going to go to function and then date and time. Let me delete this, date and time. And then you can see there's a lot of actions to help you work with date and time. You can add, you can convert, you can subtract. The one we want is now. And this gives us the current time. Now, as I also shared before, we can test this. This is a pretty straightforward, just going to give us the current time, right? This is the current time, right? Another thing that's very handy is, obviously all these variables have default names, but you can actually rename. If you click customize, if you want to say today, for example. So if you want to make it a little bit more, you give it more context, you can actually do that. And I recommend to do that. So it's a little bit easier to understand what is happening. Got today. Next, we're going to say today, let's subtract 30 days or the time window, right? And then that would be our period. I'm going to say add function, and I'm going to subtract. And again, this is again, I search, but this is subtract date and time. And then I'm going to say, again, just connect like this and subtract, right? This is how many days I want to go back. Now, this is the variable here, so which is going to be passed into this flow. So I'm going to connect like this. Now, the units, I'm going to say days. And here, again, it says output, but to make it a little bit, to give it more context, I'm going to say in activity cutoff date, right? So if someone logged in after this date, they're fine. If someone logged in before, then they're not considered active, okay? All right, next, we're gonna say continue. Again, this is like a if logic. And then we're gonna say, let's see here, last login. And inactivity cutoff date. Now, with this, and I'm going to say this is less than. So what I'm trying to say is last login was before this cutoff date, okay? Or not. Now, if it's before, which means the user is inactive, so we can go ahead and continue. Otherwise, we're going to send a message. So last login within inactivity, if I can spell, window. Okay. All right, let's test this quickly. Again, we're just using the same data. All right. So this person, if I go back, well, let me show you here. This person, Olivia, last logged in on March 29th. Right. So this is now, and then the time window is 30 days for us, right? And so this is, of course, March 29th was way before the 30-day cutoff window. And so we're going to say, hey, yes, last login was way before. And then we're going to continue. And you can see the message is null. Okay. So we found the user that's been inactive for more than 30 days. Okay. Now, let's also determine how many days this user has been inactive. And so we're going to say difference, and then this is again date and time. And when I'm going to say now notice what I can do is I can take this like this. But what's also very handy, and if you have a long flow, you can actually take the today from here and map it like this. And it's the same thing. And then, so today minus last login, and it's going to give us how many days. Now, one more thing we're going to do, I'm going to say for round, and this is from the number section. I'm going to just round the days. All right, cool. All right. Let's see, let's test this again. And so again, you can see how kind of data passes from card to card or step to step. This is very, very handy for debugging and just understanding. So you can see that I got 85.14 days here, right? Now, that's why we're just rounding to just 85. So this person logged in last 85 days ago. All right, very good. So we found a person who's not active for over 85 days. What we're going to do now is we want to save this information into a table. And then perhaps someone is going to look at the table and see all the users. Okay, so let's do that. Let's add function. And then here we got tables. And let's delete this. Tables. And again, there's a lot of things you can do. You can create rows, you can delete rows, you can export to CSV, for example. So you could actually maybe do that. Once you save all the users, you can export to a CSV file, and then someone can do that. But what we want to do is create a row. Now, we don't have a table yet, but let's click choose table. Now, I do have this one table here. Well, let me actually create a new one. Let's create a new table. And we call this inactive users 2. All right. Now we're going to create columns. So this one is going to be user ID. And this is, again, there is a type text. And I'm going to click right here, add another. This one is going to be login. This is still text. This is going to be date checked, like when was this checked? When did we run this? And that's going to be date. This is going to be last login. And this is going to be date. And finally, days since login, and then create. All right, so you can see we got our table. Let's go back here, choose a table. All right, and then save. And then you can see it actually, you can choose which inputs you would like to display, but we want all of them. Then click save. All right, and so we're going to start from the bottom up, actually, days since login. So this is the number, and we're going to map it like this. And then last login is available here. We're going to map it like this. Date checked, that's today. So we're going to do this. And then this information is coming all the way from here. Now, as you can see, you kind of have to scroll, horizontally. I'm sorry. Yes, horizontally, and then it's not convenient. So what you can do is there's a little pin, and then what this does, it keeps that start card in place, and then you can say take ID and then log in. So this is also very, very handy. All right, let's save. And this seems that's all we need. Now, let's go back here. Let's go to get users. And then let's change this to streaming now. Now we've got the helper flow, so now we can change this to streaming. And then we don't need these inputs, we just need the status. And then you can say choose flow. Now we can say this is the helper flow that we just built. Now, and the key is that, if you remember, we need to pass that additional information. That's the time period. So this is time window. Now, the key is that the variable name has to match, let's say 30 days. Let me open the other flow. The variable name has to match the one here. So just be careful. Otherwise, you're going to get an error. Okay. One more thing we're going to do quickly is we're also going to clear the table. So before we run, let's clear the table. And so we'll go to tables, clear table. We're going to delete everything from the table and choose and save. All right. All right, and I think we're ready to run. Now, both flows need to be turned on. You can see this is the helper flow, and this is a schedule. So let's go to get users. Again, we're not going to wait for the schedule. We're going to click test. And all right, so not a whole lot we can see here. We can see how many records were streamed. So I have, if you remember, 4 users. But let's go back to here and then check class login and then flow history, right? So this is where we go to see. And you can see here 933, 1, 2, 3, 4. So these are the 4 records that were streamed. And if I go to my table, I have 1 record. Now, because I only have 1 user who hasn't signed in for longer than 30 days. Now, I have 2 more users where last they signed in was about 2 days ago. So what we can do is, just to see how this works, so get users. Remember, this is the time window. I'm going to change it to 1 day, just for testing purposes. I'm going to click test. And if I go back to my table, I now have 3. Right? I've got 2 more users. You can see, so since it was 2 days since they logged in last. All right, so this is, again, obviously just for testing. All right, I know we might be a few minutes over, but I just want to show you one more thing is, let's say you want to notify someone that, hey, this flow just ran, so they know. So we're going to add a notification to Slack, right? So again, this is going to be an app action because Slack is an external service. I'm going to say Slack, and then scroll all the way down, send message to a channel. And then we're going to select the channel. We're going to send it as a bot, and then save. And then use emoji. All right, so text. So text, we're going to use another function here, and then compose, which just allows you to sort of compose any text. And we're going to say, find inactive users flow just ran. Check out the table for inactive users. And then we're going to take the output, map it like this. The name of the bot is inactive users, and my favorite emojis, I'll put this alarm. Let's click save, and let's test. All right, and this was just run now. We can see right here, find active users. So 936. This is we just received this message. All right, I know we're a few minutes over, so I apologize for that, but I just wanted to make sure we build everything. But that's it. Yeah. So I know we covered a lot, and there is still a lot more to cover. But just to give you, a quick summary, we built 2 flows. We used we learned how to start a flow various ways. We learned how to use various connections, so that's like the Okta, Slack. We also saw how to use various functions, primarily to manipulate and create data. We saw how to use tables. We saw how to test each card. We saw how to, pass data from card to card, and then we saw how to, of course, test a flow, and then also test two flows. And also in addition to using if-then type logic, we also have a kind of a for each type logic, right, where we have one flow calling another flow. All right, so let's go back here. So that's what we did. Really quickly, if you have any questions, please, my email is there, and I'm always happy to get any questions, any resources that that you want to sort of know available for workflows. That's the link. It has everything. I think all the resources, documentation, tutorials, videos, everything. One thing I forgot to mention, so this is being recorded, and I'll put this, publish this on YouTube, and then you'll get a message tomorrow with the link to this recording. So again, thank you. I know, again, we went a little bit over time, but I hope that was okay. Let me see if there are any questions. And nice use of emojis. Yes, thank you. Yeah, I love using emojis. So, and delegated flows coming soon. So yes, and I believe, and you can feel free to send me an email that you can request for that to be enabled in your preview work. So if you want to give it a try, I believe you can do that. All right. Cool. Well, again, thank you. I know went a few minutes over time, but if you have any questions, please send them to me via email, and then we'll have another event sometime at the end of July. If you have any suggestions what to cover, please let me know. Thanks for joining me today. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.